so small, and I was very scared. They were white beds, like hospital beds.
This will be your bed.
I remember being taken into a large shower room where I was stripped down and I was showered. I never had anybody but my mother touch me. So that was scary in itself, having someone I didn't know bathe me.
We were punished in school, spoke our own language. When I first went to school, I had to learn English and French. We didn't understand them, and how come they could speak French and us, we couldn't speak our language.
Répétez.
Plan in the Shanakaz.
You will learn to speak God's language.
You will not only learn how to cook and sew and farm, but you will learn how to pray and to whom to pray.
One of the punishments for speaking our language and losing all our tokens was to hold your tongue.
Welcome to We Were Children channel, a Dilworth School survivors vlog. The intro you just watched was the trailer for a doco-drama called We Were Children. Because the story is very similar to that of the Dilworth story is why I named this channel after it. We will delve more into that later in this episode. We're going to cover in this episode the lost generation of the 70s and early 80s. Our go-to reference guide, the Dilworth Legacy books, do a good job of explaining the lost generation of the 70s.
Enrolment issues. But the most serious element in the complex blending of people was the quality of the boys admitted to the school in the 1970s. Parr made it very clear in many reports to the board that a few unsatisfactory boys could infect the rest of the school. To all those pressures were added the other ingredients of the 1975 economic and social turmoil to produce a volatile mix. Appeals for more professional help to deal with boys whose psychological problems were beyond the experience or capabilities of the staff were generally ignored, other than referring them to an outside agency. The result of all these factors was a school which was difficult, at times impossible, to manage. It would be unfair to the many good boys who passed through the school in those days to say that it was a general trend, but history records that there is indeed a lost generation. Literally hundreds of boys for whom the Dilworth experience meant very little. In effect, millions of dollars of the trust resources were wasted on boys who never had the potential or the desire to rise above their station in life. D.S. Firth's later coining of the expression, "We will take in good boys and make them better," would have been a very helpful mission statement in those sad days, but it was not until the early 1980s that he was able to persuade his colleagues to adopt it.
So here the former management are blaming the quality of boys they are taking into the school for getting poor educational results. But the truth is, the period of the late 60s, early 70s, there was 6 pedophiles operating in the school. I wonder if sexual assault would affect your educational results. Let's have a look at what the experts have to say.
Barnes and Josephowitz, 2014, authors, PhD clinical psychologists, listed a number of outcomes that have been associated with the experience of child sexual assault, include psychological difficulties such as depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, personality disorders, and psychotic disorders, behavioural problems such as substance abuse, self-harm, eating disorders, conduct disorders, and antisocial behaviour, as well as relationship difficulties, poorer physical health, and poorer educational and occupational achievement.
Oh look, what a coincidence. Poorer educational and occupational achievement. Now let's have a look at another comment made in the legacy books during the same period.
Disturbed boys. At the May meeting of trustees, the headmaster presented a list of some 41 boys, 1/6 of the total roll, who were considered by staff to be emotionally unstable and who required handling with extreme care. He warned of the repercussions of having such large numbers of boys who were in need of specialist treatment and care. Several of the boys on his list had been referred to the Education Department's psychological service, and Parr emphasised that he and his staff had neither the time nor the specialist knowledge to deal with such cases. With the best will in the world, he informed the trustees, the teachers, tutors and matrons can rapidly get out of their depth when a boy's psychological development becomes atypical. He recommended that the trustees consider these matters very deeply and investigate the desirability of having a school counsellor on the same basis as those regularly appointed in state schools. He believed that allowing the chaplain more non-contact time to handle individual cases would be a profitable first step towards improving the situation.
Let's have a look at what the management said about the 70s at the Royal Commission.
And we've certainly seen some evidence from survivors of abuse at Dilworth who described the environment at the school in the 70s and into the 80s as being a cruel place. Now, so you've come in at the end of the 70s. Do you accept that characterisation that the experience of the boys might have been that it was a cruel environment to be living in?
I think it probably was. I mean, I wasn't there in the 70s, so I can't speak with authority, but everything I've read and heard about things that went on in that period suggests to me that, yes, it probably was a very uncomfortable and threatening environment for many boys.
Headmaster Parr applied to the board 3 times to have a counsellor at the school. Both Parr and the Trust Board knew boys had been abused because before they caught the chaplain Peter Taylor, they caught John Stevens and Leonard Cave in the early 70s. This did not come out in the Dilworth response at the Royal Commission. When Chaplain Peter Taylor was caught, he provided a list of 10 boys he abused. Headmaster Parr proposed yet again to have a counsellor. This is what the legacy books say about Peter Taylor's departure.
In November 1978, the chaplain, P.J. Taylor, resigned and left the school immediately after a period when, as Parr reported to the board, he appeared to be getting offside with most of the boys. This provided the headmaster with the opportunity to repeat an earlier suggestion to the board to hire a professional counsellor.
They now have the salary of the chaplain that they could use to pay for a counsellor, and they had a list of 10 boys who were abused. So why didn't they employ a counsellor? One can only assume the reason for not employing a counsellor at this critical time, and with so many boys that needed help, is because they knew what was going on in the school and they were worried a counsellor might expose too much and they won't be able to keep a lid on the truth getting out, thus ending up on the front page of the newspaper. Instead, they employed pedophile Chaplain Ross Brown. I'm going to digress for a moment here to corporal punishment of the 70s to an interview with Rodney Ty, who was cane tortured for no reason. I call it torture because the tutor that caned him was an Olympic rower who used his strength and fitness to go way past punishment to physical assault. Welcome, Rod, to another episode of We Were Children. Thanks for coming on today. Now, Rod, I understand during your time at Dilworth, you were caned for no reason. Could that be correct?
Right. Yeah, I was. That's right, Greg. I actually was in my bed and I had to go to the toilet. I got up and I went to have a pee, basically, and I was on the urinal, and a tutor at the time, his name was Peter Dignan, basically barreled back to school after being out on a night's enjoyment with alcohol, and stunk of alcoholic breath, and see me on the urinal and told me I wasn't allowed to be up at that time and proceeded to take me downstairs and cane me for. And consequently, he being a New Zealand member of the rowing 8 at the time, it won the bronze medal in the Olympics. I actually went back to bed and I was bleeding and had quite a bit of blood on my pajamas and my sheets in the morning. I remember being a bit embarrassed from it, and I packed the whole lot up, and then I washed the whole lot myself by hand because I was so embarrassed of it. And I couldn't really sit down really well because I just had that much bruising on my backside that it was ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And that's
remember in the communal, because we had communal showers, we used to know who Dignan had caned, because normally with a caning, you just get some red stripes on the arse, you know. But when they'd been caned by Dignan, their whole arse was like black and blue, you know, from the sheer. He used all his strength, you know, and of course he was fit and had a lot of strength. I mean, they won bronze at the Montreal Olympics for rowing. So he was, you know, yeah. Well, thanks very much for that, Rod, for sharing your story today. Gratefully appreciated.
That's all right, Greg. Not a problem.
Okay, so the former management say the reason for the lost generation is the quality of the intake of boys. The survivors say the lost generation was caused by 16 pedophiles who were abusing boys through the lost generation period. The code of silence provided the environment where psychological, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse was allowed to thrive. Corporal punishment was out of control, with boys being caned for trivial things, like not brushing their teeth. They were caned for reporting sexual abuse, and sometimes for no reason at all, as we just covered with Rodney Ty. These are the reasons hundreds of boys for whom the Dilworth experience meant very little. In effect, millions of dollars of the trust resources were wasted. Now, for the We Were Children channel name and picture. This picture I've used is the first Dilworth class of 1906 in their Sunday best. The We Were Children channel name came from the docudrama We Were Children, which parallels the Dilworth story. Lina and Glenn are two Indigenous Canadian children who endure years of sexual, emotional and physical abuse at a church-run boarding school. Here is a more detailed trailer for the docudrama.
The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children and to assimilate them into the dominant culture.
All she said to me was to be good and to listen, and she never said any more. I don't think they could even fathom what would happen.
They built these schools away from the reserve and run by the churches.
No one was allowed to touch each other or to talk to each other.
99? That's you.
You will learn to speak God's language.
I could hear the steps coming towards the girls' infirmary, and I was the only one in there. And then I couldn't breathe.
I don't know what kind of God they have.
When I hear people that firmly believe that nothing happened in these schools, well, I can tell my story.
The We Were Children docudrama is currently available on Prime Video. The trailer makes mention of 150,000 Aboriginal children, which is closer to home. They're known as the stolen generation. I'll share an animation on the stolen generation and intergenerational abuse. It's put out by the Healing Foundation. Consequently, it has a very nice survivor healing message towards the end.
The story of our communities, people and nation starts a long, long time ago. More than 60,000 years, in fact. This was when our culture and our law first started to thrive. We knew who we were and where we belonged. We took care of each other, our land and our waters. We ate food that made us healthy, lived on country and abided by our laws and song lines. Our families, our children were happy, with strong minds and hearts, because they were where they belonged. But then, everything changed.
Colonization came, bringing wars, disease, famine, violence, and the destruction and violation of our cultural laws, sacred sites, families, and communities.
We were denied our knowledge, language, ceremonies, and identity, the very things that tell us who we are and where we belong. And our connections with each other and the land grew weak.
And then, our children were taken from us. They had their names changed and their identities stripped away. They were told that Aboriginal people were bad. Worse still, they were told that their parents and grandparents did not want them.
For years this happened, and those children became known as the stolen generations.
Our children were denied love and experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. This left very deep, very complex, and very real wounds, leaving scars that are still being felt personally, socially, spiritually, and collectively.
In the time when our story started, we were able to parent in the cultural way that has seen our families survive and thrive for generations. Our people were strong, and our culture flowed and healed us in times of hurt.
But since the trauma of colonization and the stolen generations, we have not been able to heal in the same way. And we have unknowingly passed this trauma on to our children through sharing our sad stories and having them witness and experience our pain. This is known as intergenerational trauma, and we see symptoms today in broken relationships, disconnected families, violence, suicide, and drug and alcohol abuse.
But this is not where our story ends. We still have strong minds and hearts, and we still know who we were and where we belong. By creating safe and strong communities together, supporting our families to be free from pain, returning to our culture and building a strength of identity, we can stop the cycle of trauma and bring about positive intergenerational change, so that we can continue to thrive for the next 60,000 years. There are simple things that we can all do to help heal our trauma.
Visit healingfoundation.org.au to find out more.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so I can let you know about the next episode. Thank you for watching.
If Isabella Dilworth was alive today, she would